You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode. Here we have Henry Yoshida, who is CEO of Rocket Dollar. He founded Honest Dollar, which was actually acquired by Goldman Sachs. And he worked for years for Merrill Lynch, holds an MBA, and he lives in Austin with his daughters. Welcome, Henry.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, so today I'm excited because you're going to share what's going on in the private investment world and how, more than ever now, people can invest in private investments in their IRA and also not. But, I know you're going to cover all of that. So
Sure.
What's going on now?
Well, this whole century, and now we're a quarter of the way through it. So it's kind of amazing to think about that. But ever since the turn of the century, the private investment markets have grown quite significantly relative to public markets. A little known fact is that at the turn of the century, there were over 10,000 publicly traded companies. And now in 2026, that number is less, even though the economy has expanded quite significantly since then. There are less than 4,000 publicly traded companies, and now companies elect to stay private for much, much longer, and they get much, much bigger by staying private. So it just means that regular investors need to follow the large institutions. And if they want to sustain themselves with a fully diversified portfolio towards retirement and other things, they need to start investing in private investments as well, just because it's just, quite frankly, a larger part of the overall investment world today.
Okay, so something's changed where people can acquire money in a private company where they couldn't before they had to go public, correct?
Exactly. It's just that the private equity type markets or private investments have just grown. And because of the growth, they've created vehicles to where now maybe more regular retail investors are able to access. So people are creating systems, they're creating laws, they're creating platforms that allow you to invest in privately traded companies. Rocket Dollar is a little bit different in that I'm probably one of these guys who starts companies in the financial technology space, wasn't smart enough to think about how to do this democratization and create access. So I went the other direction and thought about, how do I help Americans tap into the supply? So where's the money that they would use to go into these private investments? And that's where the epiphany came to me to start Rocket Dollar in 2018, which was that why don't I help Americans tap into their existing 401ks and IRAs, keep the same tax treatment, and use those monies to then go into the private investments? Someone else is creating the way to go do that type of investing. But I thought that the bigger problem was where you're going to get the money from to do those investments. And that's what I saw.
What you're saying is people have the money and now they can invest with that in companies they never could have invested in before, correct?
That is true. And, when you say that that's where people have their money, the reality is today in the first quarter of 2026, the last recorded numbers, they do this quarterly and it's about a 6-month lag. So the fourth quarter of 2025, there are now upwards of $46 trillion sitting in U.S. retirement accounts. And, the one thing, if you know anything about retirement accounts, it's known that they have good tax treatment and they're designed as long-term vehicles or account holdings. It's not your checking and savings account where you use that money to pay your day-to-day bills. It's money that you get tax benefits if you keep it in place for years and even decades at one time. So yes, quite frankly, there's a lot of money, and roughly 99% of it is invested in only stocks, bonds, and mutual funds right now. But our job at Rocket Dollar is to allow them to use those same monies, keep the same tax treatment in these long-term retirement type accounts, and make private and alternative investments using those monies.
Right, for sure. Now there is a big push. Not a push, but there is an introduction. People didn't know about private equity. They didn't even know what that was. And now Tony Robbins was talking about it in his book that was actually Ray Dalio's Holy Grail of Marketing. He wrote the book, but it was actually Ray Dalio's Holy Grail, right?
Right.
That he laid out in principles. People are now more aware of trying to have uncorrelated investments, which is kind of hard actually, because in the end, I don't know if you agree with me, most of them are kind of correlated, even when they say they're not. Would you agree with me?
Well, and I have a stance on that too. It's when I started my career in the financial services and investment world, we were trained to where you would diversify your portfolio with uncorrelated assets between stocks and bonds. So, you would do a typical 60-40 split. That was kind of the basis, and that had held true for 50 years. But mathematically now, again, in this first quarter century of the 21st century, it's been shown that stocks and bonds are actually very correlated to each other. So now where do you go if you need to be in an investment that will zag when the overall public stock market zigs? And that's where the private markets come into play now.
Stocks and bonds for sure are correlated. That's not having any diversity, really. I mean, and then you got the Bitcoin. Everybody thought that was, so then, it's private equity. Well, that isn't correlated. That's true, right? I mean, there's some effect of the stock market, maybe on some of them, but if a company is doing well, then it might not matter what the stocks are doing, the stock market is doing, correct?
Exactly. And the private markets, there's a lot. So when you say private markets, it's not necessarily private companies. So it could be private lending. It could be related to real estate and a different type of real estate, not a publicly traded REIT. So this could just be a single family home, and certain markets will perform differently and be truly uncorrelated to the machinations of Wall Street and publicly traded stocks. And then sometimes it could be, just large cap, large market value, privately traded companies like an OpenAI or SpaceX. I mean, the reality is that if those two companies were public, they'd already be in the top 10 in the S&P 500 if they were publicly traded today.
Sure, but it's actually hard to get into those companies. You have to know somebody that's, you have to know somebody that has a certain amount of shares because I was in a WhatsApp group and they said, hey, we have access to this many SpaceX, but you can't get them unless you know somebody that's brokering them, I guess. Is that how they do it?
Well, there are platforms, there's well-known digital platforms that will get allocations from former employees in most cases. And they would get this allocation. And let's say that they were able to get a hold of $20 million worth of stock in that particular company. And their platform allows people to make investments in increments of 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, or $50,000 to then take parts of that $20 million chunk. So, and this is another reason why I think that the private markets are just becoming more and more relevant and more important. So one of the biggest platforms, one of our partners at Rocket Dollar, is an organization called EquityZen, based in New York City. They're about 2 blocks away from the headquarters of the New York Stock Exchange, and they were recently agreed to be acquired by Morgan Stanley. And this was a company that actually did broker positions in stocks like SpaceX, OpenAI, Anthropic, and you name it, a lot of other private companies. And we had customers using funds from their IRAs and their Rocket Dollar accounts to then make investments into shares of these privately held companies.
Wow. Okay. So Rocket Dollar is a platform where it's connected to people's IRAs and then they can just directly invest from there. Is that correct?
So we are an IRA platform. So, individuals can choose to have an IRA account at some place like SoFi or Robinhood. They can have an IRA account at Vanguard, Fidelity, or Schwab, or they can have an IRA with E-Trade, Edward Jones, Merrill Lynch with a financial advisor, or they can have an IRA with us here at Rocket Dollar. The difference is that our IRA accounts, once you fund it with money and fund it with funds, allow you to go into private investments. Now, our customers are the ones who have to go locate those private investments. So that could be through a partner like EquityZen, or they could find a single family home they want to purchase, but the funds inside their IRA would be used to make that investment purchase.
Okay, so you're just making it easy to just directly invest. That's what it does.
Well, I think that we even take a step back, which is that we help Americans unlock the money that they already have in these IRAs or 401k accounts. And, 3 minutes ago, I mentioned that that's upwards of $46 trillion today. But for the most part, 99% is only invested in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds because of the 7 providers that I listed other than Rocket Dollar 1 minute ago. They only allow you to invest in public stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. So if we let you go into private investments, you can tap into the money that you already have. So we ourselves are not an investment manager. We just help Americans unlock the dollars that they have in these accounts, and then they go make private and alternative investments as they find those opportunities.
For sure. Now, you can do this already from your solo 401k, but you'd have to have a solo 401k to do that.
So we have those. So we offer those accounts too. So solo 401k, IRA, they're just variations of. I think that colloquially they're recognized as retirement accounts, but the reality is that they're set up as tax advantaged accounts. The tax advantage is given to you by the IRS by your willingness to put the money away for only investment purposes for a set period of time, whether that's years or decades. And in return, you are given tax deferral or tax advantages for having monies in those accounts. So obviously people use those because the time frame for when you can access that money is typically 59 and a half and beyond, which is when the normal American person hopes to be retired. So they just get labeled as retirement accounts. But for all technical purposes, they're governed by the IRS. And they are tax advantaged accounts since they're governed by the IRS codes.
Sure. Okay, great. So what are some tips for people? People don't know how to evaluate an investment. So you're saying they could just go to Equity Zen and Equity Zen would help them out with that. Is that correct?
So companies like that offer on their platform, they have share allocations to 100 or so of the largest privately held companies. That's an example. So if someone wanted to take some of their rocket dollar IRA money and go into a large privately held company with the expectation that they would go public and continue to grow, then they would go to Equity Zen. Now, to get to your point about people don't know how to evaluate these investments, I'd actually kind of take another side of that, which is that there are certain types of investments that I think the average American investor is more equipped to evaluate, which might be that, hey, I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in an IRA account in the S&P 500 index fund, which is largely concentrated from a returns and earnings standpoint into the largest 7 of those companies, which are all in technology. And it could be argued that you don't have little understanding of those. But if you decide to say, let's take 200,000, move it to a rocket dollar account, and use that to purchase a single family home as a rental investment property on the other side of town from where you've lived for 30 years, I would argue that that individual investor is very knowledgeable about their local market, where a good opportunity is, and where a good rental property might be identified to hold as an investment using IRA dollars. So, what people choose to do from a private standpoint, again, they're going to do what they're comfortable with, what they're able to research, or maybe some of the platforms that they have access to. But for us, we just facilitate the creation of the IRA, the unlocking of that money, and then for your ability to go into those private investments. But it could be argued that depending on what you do, you may feel like you have a lot more control or knowledge, or just like the idea that the rental property 40 miles away from where you live is a lot more tangible than a digital piece of paper representing a small microscopic piece of ownership in a major corporation that you might not quite understand exactly what they do.
For sure. I think that's the real gold here is you can actually buy, but you could always, you know what? But for a while, people were able to buy homes out of their IRAs that were LLCs. That's been going on a while. What's different about this? Because it's just from the platform you can do it?
Well, remember, people are able to do these with LLCs, but and so forth. And people have always been able to buy private investments. But the reality is that most people accumulate a lot of dollars inside of these retirement accounts. As you go from job to job, you might contribute or participate in the 401k plan. And if those monies have been invested for a period of 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years, with no taxes being paid in the stock market, which has grown significantly from 1980 to now, then you've accumulated a lot of dollars inside of these accounts. It's just that, you can make private investments if you have money separate from these accounts to go into that. But the reality is that a large portion of Americans who do the more typical 9 to 5 W-2 income and contribute 5 to 10% to a 401k for a sustained period of time are not people who end up having $300,000 sitting in a bank account to go make private investments. They end up with 400 to 500,000 in a 401k/IRA that they've only contributed 150,000 to, and the other 350 is growth. So all I'm trying to do is match up where the dollars are held by most American investors with long time horizons and great tax treatment to go into these investments. And private investments, they do typically require a larger ticket amount. You can buy public stock now for as little as $1, but you cannot buy a secondary position in SpaceX off of Equity Zen for only $1. It might require a minimum investment of $10,000 or $15,000.
For sure. So, no, my question was, I do know that there was a way to invest from your IRA in properties prior to this, but it was more difficult.
It was more difficult. So here's the thing. Technically, IRAs were created in 1974, so they're roughly 51, 52 years old today. And even at the inception of the creation of IRAs in the 1970s, it was never disallowed for people to use IRA and 401k money to go into private investments. It's just that most of the providers who created and facilitated IRAs and 401ks disallowed those investors from doing anything other than their stocks, bonds, and mutual funds because they were brokerage houses, right? They were in the business of brokering public stocks, bonds, and creating and distributing mutual funds. So they actually didn't want those customers to purchase things like property or make investments into private companies. So to your point, it's never been disallowed. It's just that there aren't a lot of providers out there who let their customers buy private investments. Rocket Dollar is an IRA provider, and we only let our customers do private and alternative investments and not public investments. So we're the opposite of that. So if we make it easy to access that money, then all of a sudden now you're able to do this without having to have this conversation with Fidelity for them to tell you that no, you can purchase a REIT that is publicly traded real estate investment trust, but not a single family home.
You know what I think a big problem with human beings and people is there's this feeling of, well, I don't know where everything is. And I had an IRA here and here. Do you help them compile all of that and get it all in the same spot?
They can. And that's actually a good practice, not just with Rocket Dollar, but with really any IRA type provider. I mean, one of the rules of thumb is that when IRAs and 401k started in 1974, a large portion of American workers actually spent significant amounts of time at a single employer. Whereas nowadays, if you meet someone who says they've worked with the same company for maybe even 15 years or more, that's actually a rare situation now. 25 years ago, you met a lot of people who were with the same company for 15, 20, 25, and 30 years. So a good rule of thumb or a good financial practice in general for folks here in your audience would be that as you move from job to job, maybe take that 401k and consolidate to an IRA that you open that's always in your name. So you always keep those accounts with you so you don't lose track, because right now I'm thinking to myself, you'd mentioned some of the past companies I'd started and sold. I had other jobs since then. If you were to list yours, we'd probably have a hard time listing the companies that we've worked for throughout our career. And if we had retirement accounts at each of those, we might have some of this, what is stranded money as well. So the best thing is when you leave a company, clean up and take your money with you and keep it in your IRA. And you might accumulate that IRA at Rocket Dollar. You might have it at Fidelity or some other provider. But good rule of thumb is as you leave companies, just in case, check to make sure that you didn't leave any retirement monies at that old company, because they'll keep it there on your behalf. But after about 15 years, you're going to have a hard time remembering all the different places you might have worked.
Then when you pass away, does it become like government funds?
It doesn't become government funds. The government actually holds it at their level in a cash account, no longer an investment in your name. So the term is called escheatment. So then you have to keep track of all the states you might have worked in, because those are dictated by states. So one of the things I do every year with some friends of mine, I'm always telling friends of mine that at the end of the year, go look for that extra found money. And these are probably, to be fair, friends of mine that don't need to go look for some of these small amounts that are there, but they're always interested to find out that, an old closed bank account, an old retirement account, they have $1,000 here, $500 there, and it's kept in your name under your social security number by state. So if, in addition to moving job to job, you also move from state to state, it starts to get a little bit messy. It's not clean.
What's the website where you can type your name in and unpaid funds, I think they call it?
Yeah, but those are like paid services. I mean, the reality is that you could just kind of Google like Escheatment and then the state that you knew that you had a job in, just to see, and then they'll direct you to the government website where you can index that. So if you spend time in Massachusetts and work there, spend time in Texas, or spend time in the state of California, you can find the individual sites. So it's like a lot of things. You could pay for services to get things like your credit report, as an example, but there's also ways that you can get them without having to pay. So I'm just trying to help people skip the middleman.
Sometimes when people would reach out and say, "Hey, do you know that there's funds?" And I looked and it was so little, I just thought, it's not even worth, I'm not going to hire you to go get me $100, but sometimes they don't know. They don't know how much it is. They just know your name came up.
Right. But, some people with the old 401ks, this is before people pass away, but, they may have spent 6 years at the job and contributed or auto contributing to the 401k without realizing it. And then 10 years later, they were in this job for 6 years. 16 years ago, they started, and they left 10 years ago. People find out that they might have amounts in the 5 or 6 figure level. I mean, we've seen that quite a bit as well. So Remember, these monies are no longer invested, so you want to take advantage and actually try to grow them.
Why lose money? So, Henry, what do people do specifically? Let's go through that slowly. So they look up Escheatment. So they Google Escheatment and the state. Is that correct?
Escheatment. So like it's
how do you spell
it? Escheatment.
Okay, I got that completely wrong. Okay.
Yeah. So it's one of those like SAT words, right? Like if you know it,
exactly.
You're scoring in the 90th percentile and above.
Exactly. Now I know how to spell Escheatment. Thank you. I learned something.
So not only am I helping like working Americans, I'm probably helping their late high school age students.
Right. Spelling. So what do? Let's just take people through this because they'd be like, what? So we Google Escheatment and you put the state, and then a website comes up and you type your name in it to see if there's any money for you there. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, you might have to give your full legal name. You might have to, in some cases, to drill it down if you have a very common name. Luckily, my name is Henry Yoshida, so it's not super common here in the United States. But if your name was Jane Doe, you might need to give additional identifiers, like maybe where you might have lived, what city.
And you put all the info, and then it just comes up with it.
But the better place to start is that I would probably tell people that by the time money ends up at these websites at the state, it's because these are small amounts and they completely close the account on your behalf. I would probably start first with really doing an inventory of where are all the places that you had a job, and maybe they were contributing, because starting in 2005 in America, companies automatically put some money into retirement accounts. They automatically took a portion of your salary, unless you told them not to, and put it into a 401k plan. So you have a lot of people who maybe were actually contributing a 1, 2, 3, 5% of their salary to a retirement plan for many years and not know that they did it, and since left that job. I'd probably go look for the old employers first.
You reach out to the employer and you say, hey, I used to work for you and I just wanted to check to see whether I had a 401k with you there. Is that it?
Yeah, you could do that. And so that would typically be your human resources department. And remember, this is where you're chasing bigger dollars and a better route to go. But and if that company is no longer in business, you might need to start to think about, like, where did they have that 401k? So who was the facilitator, administrator of that plan? Was it Nationwide? Was it Empower? Was it Fidelity?
If you have no idea, maybe you should just go straight for those companies and say, hey, can I give you my name?
They're used to getting these calls from ex-employees asking about that. And they'll say that, back in that period, we had our plan. It was administered by Nationwide. So you'd call them here and go find. But, people have these accounts because, again, as I mentioned, in 2005, they passed a law called the Pension Protection Act. And in an effort to help Americans or force some savings among Americans, they actually automatically enrolled participants in 401ks, usually starting at a 3% of salary position. So if you, just to make math easy, you had a $100,000 salary, they automatically enrolled you at 3. The company gave you a match of 50%. You were putting away 4.5% of $100,000 for the 5 years you worked there, even if you didn't proactively think you joined the plan. So if that was 15 years ago, and then it's grown in the stock market, could be a decently significant amount of money and worth you spending your time to go find it.
Could be, yeah. Well, thank you for all that. Okay, so what are some of the companies that you personally invest in? Because you're obviously investing in private investments yourself, correct?
Sure. And, what I do is I invest in some friends' private startup technology companies. So these are, just very early stage technology companies. I usually concentrate in areas of consumer financial technology. That's the area that I specialize in, with Rocket Dollar, with Honest Dollar. I also own rental properties using my IRA account. And then I have one, what they call limited partner investment. So that's where I made a commitment of $50,000 into a private fund. That fund invests in whatever they invest in companies. It's a 10-year fund, still cycling through on year 6 of that particular fund. And they own little portions of stock in, I think it's about 32 small private technology companies of various stages from seed through Series B. And that's kind of what I do with mine. But again, like most folks, I keep a good basis and foundation of my own retirement monies in traditional investments, because I would be the first to tell you that Rocket Dollar isn't the first IRA account that people have. It's usually a complementary one to a standard portfolio. So think like your new core and satellite. If you remember those terms in investments and financial services, the core now is just public equities, traditional type investments, and the satellite now is private investments. And if you're going to own those private investments, it's more tax efficient. They're typically long-term, somewhat illiquid investments compared to stocks where you can buy and sell all day long while the market's open, like it is right now as we record. But they're better suited to these retirement accounts because even at my age, I can't access my accounts for more than a decade.
Very interesting. Okay, great. Henry, thank you for turning up. And just before we leave, maybe share something. You're a very successful person. Maybe share, and not about what we just spoke about, but just about life. Can you share some philosophy or mindset that you live by?
I'm a big front load my day. I like to start my day early, so my alarm goes off at 4:45 in the morning. I get my exercise and workout out of the way because that kind of gives me the foundation to do everything else. And I try to tackle, while I have my energies high, the hardest things I have to do for that day. So today I started with writing responses for a journalist for USA Today. That was the hardest thing I had to do today. Yours were scheduled, so I didn't really have much of a choice, and you didn't want to talk to me at 5 a.m. in the morning. But
No.
if you front load the day, you kind of tackle your biggest rocks early when your energy is highest. So I feel like that's just been kind of my own personal blueprint to getting more done than I think I otherwise would.
Okay, you're doing the swallow the frog, the Stephen Covey swallow the frog first. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Wow, you get up at 4:45. Some people just aren't morning people like you. Thank you for turning up. Thank you for listening. I hope you got a lot out of this and learned more about what's going on and what's possible in private investments. Take care. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jean Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jean Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.